I have been looking forward to this last panel event ever since we began talking about it in the office about what would be a great way to end this symposium, celebrating our 50th anniversary, thinking about the challenges that not only we've already dealt with, but where we're going from here. And this morning's panel is thinking about the outlook, both short-term and longer-term. And in this panel, which we've given them the task of thinking about the next 50 years. But before I do that, I would be remiss, and I hope that she's in the room, but I don't see. Is Kate Newberg in the room anywhere? Kate? Well, I'll wait till she comes back in the room and we'll break out in spontaneous applause, but I owe her a great deal for the event. So let me get started with the panel. And I want to read you just a few things that we talked about as we set the stage for this panel, and then I'll introduce the distinguished panel that we have in front of you this morning. So we're going to be talking about the next 50 years and what does it hold for Iowa soybean farmers, Iowa agriculture, and U.S. agriculture. The global soybean industry has changed dramatically over the last 50 years, as we've been talking about. And again, maybe it's an old cliche, but the only thing that we know for sure is that we'll continue to see change moving forward in the next 50 years. But the question this morning for our panels, but in what ways will it change? What will be the impact of emerging technologies and those technologies we've not yet even imagined? What will rural America look like in 2030, 2040, or even 2060? Will soybeans still be a major crop in the U.S., or will our production be replaced by farmers in other parts of the world, such as Africa? Will family farms still dominate the production side of the industry in Iowa, or will we see consolidation to the point that the countryside has been depopulated, or at least depopulated of farmers? Will we recognize today's commodity soybean crop and its two major products, soybean meal and soybean oil, or will these current uses be replaced by a diverse set of output traits? Will our industry still be driven by exports of commodities in new and emerging markets, or will soybean products be used more domestically, perhaps in higher value products? And will global population reach and exceed 9 billion, or will it peak and then fall to levels that cause concerns about the ability of our planet to maintain itself? Think about the change in dynamics. And if you know anything about demographics and the change in population growth in some parts of the world, we could be looking at a falling population in this time period, perhaps. What will the relationship between farmers, tech providers, and service providers be? Will they further fully vertically integrate, or will we have new technologies and new economies of scale unleash a new wave of competition built upon new structures and new business models? And what will be the capital needs of farms and the farmers that produce the crops? Will new ownership models evolve to more adequately address these capital needs? So these are just a few of the areas that I want to consider in the next 90 minutes. No, we're not going to answer all those questions. This distinguished panel will help us have a dialogue. The good news is that at least for most of us in this room, 50 years is so far out, we won't be here to be proven right or wrong. Some of you perhaps will come together at the 100th anniversary of this organization and recall that distinguished panel up the front of the room and what they said. But again, for most of us, we won't have probably that pleasure. And after I introduce the members of the panel here, I want to ask each to offer a few comments or suggestions about the next 50 years, and then we'll engage in a group discussion on some of the issues that they will raise. I promise we'll save at least 30 minutes, if not more, but at least 30 minutes at the end of their discussion and our engagement here on the stage to answer your questions. So there are paper and pen in front of you. I suggest that as comments are made, observations are shared, that you agree with or disagree with or think the panel has completely lost their mind, I would ask you to jot that down. And when we have that opportunity, we will go to live questions from the audience. We'll have folks that will ask you to stand up, give us your name, and as quickly as you can, state your questions so that the panel can respond. So if I can, let me introduce to you this really distinguished panel that we have with us today. First of all, I see him in the middle there, Rob, Dr. Rob Fraley, if you want to wave at the group. He is currently the Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at the Monsanto Company. He has been with the company for more than 30 years. and currently oversees the company's global technology division, which includes plant breeding, plant biotechnology, ag biologicals, precision agriculture, and crop protection. He is recognized as the father of ag biotechnology and has been involved in ag research since the early 1980s. He has authored more than 100 publications and patent applications. Dr. Fraley's discoveries and application of science are also routinely recognized for the tremendous impact they've had in supporting farmers and the agriculture demands of our planet. He has many, many honors, as you can imagine, in his distinguished career. He received the National Medal of Technology from President Clinton, and most recently, or at least one of the more recent awards that he received that many of us were there to see and to honor him with, was he received the World Food Prize laureate in 2013. So, Dr. Fraley, it's good to have you here. Yeah, please. Second member of our panel is Jim Knuth. Jim is sitting here on the end next to me. He is Senior Vice President of the Farm Credit Services of America. He has 30 years of commercial and agricultural lending experience and now leads Farm Credit Services of America's Iowa retail lending operations. These lending operations serve the needs of over 23,000 Iowa producers and include $7 billion in loan assets and the largest crop insurance agency in the state of Iowa. He grew up in Iowa on a beef cattle farm, is an Iowa State graduate, and I know you've got at least 2 daughters at Iowa State or were at Iowa State. He's done his part. He's married and the father of 4 children. So welcome to Jim Knuth from Farm Credit Services. Our next panelist in the middle is Paul Schickler. Paul is the president of DuPont Pioneer, the advanced seed genetics business of DuPont. In this role, which he has held since 2007, he has continued to expand Pioneer's global business by remaining focused on innovation and improves local productivity and profitability of farmers in more than 90 countries. Since joining Pioneer in 1974, Paul has served in a variety of finance and administrative leadership roles throughout the business, including Vice President of International Operations from 1999 to 2007. He currently serves on the DuPont Committee on Agriculture Innovation and Productivity in the 21st Century and the DuPont Agriculture Decision Board and is a member of the DuPont operating team. He is a graduate of Drake University, where he received both a Bachelor's of Science and a Master of Arts degree in Business Administration. He serves on a number of boards, as you can imagine, including, I believe, chair of the Greater Des Moines Partnership and Grandview University. He is vice president of the STEM Food and Agricultural Council and is also a member of the Cultivation Corridor Board of Directors, the Chicago Council on Global Affairs Board of Directors, the Chicago Council's Global Agricultural Development Initiative Advisory Board, and the Iowa Business Council. Paul is a strong contributor to the community, including a major gift he and his wife made to the World Food Prize for the Youth Institute, which we're all thankful for. He's also a supporter of a program that's near and dear to us at the Soybean Association, Meals from the Heartland, and is a Farm Journal Legacy Project participant as well. Please join me in welcoming Paul Schickler to the panel this morning as well. And the last, but certainly not the least member of our panel on the end is Harry Stein. Harry, it's good to have you here as well. And of all of these panelists up here, Harry's the one I've known the longest time. And so when I talked to Harry about joining this panel, I said, so what should I put on your bio and your introduction? And those of you know Harry, you probably wouldn't be surprised what he said to me. Just tell him I'm a farmer. Just tell him I'm a farmer. But as you know, Harry is certainly a farmer, but he's also the founder and president of Stein Seed Company. I've got a list of things he's done here. He graduated from McPherson College. He's received countless awards in Iowa and across the country, including Ag Marketer of the Year, Entrepreneur of the Year. He was named by the Des Moines Register as one of the 50 most influential people in Iowa. Harry, I think they weren't fair to you. I think you're one of the top 10 most influential people in the state of Iowa. He has an honorary degree from McPherson College as well. He's been inducted in the Iowa Business Hall of Fame. He's got a list of accomplishments here that I won't go through, but at the end of the day, I think you're right, Harry. You're a farmer. Please join me in welcoming Harry Stein to the podium as well. And I forgot to mention as well, in many conversations I've had with Harry, he's never been afraid to offer me his advice and counsel on changing and emerging. But I do want to mention that Harry was also, used to be on the board of the Iowa Soybean Association and certainly has contributed. Before my time, he was on the board, but he did that as well. So with that, I think we'll just go with the list and the way I offered the introductions. And we'll just, again, ask each of the panelists now to share some observations. We did give them some advance notice of what we were asking to do. One of the rules was there are no overheads, there's no slides here. We're just going to have a conversation. So with that, Dr. Fraley, if you'd like to go first, that would be great, and offer your thoughts. And you can stand or sit, whatever you're most comfortable with.
Well, I'm very comfortable and very delighted to be here, and it's great to be back in Des Moines. You know, I had the privilege, as was mentioned, to be here for the World Food Prize, you know, a year ago when I was the recipient, and that was, you know, a very special impact. You know, as a farm kid growing up in Illinois, the first one in the family to go to college, to look back on a 30-plus year career and see what the science of biotechnology has done is personally rewarding. But to see it, you know, be recognized, you know, with the World Food Prize made it particularly special. And a big reason for that was for the last 20 years of his life, I had a chance to know Dr. Borlaug personally, and you know, considered him as a real mentor. And when you look back at what Norm accomplished with the Green Revolution, you know, it was a combination of both his innovation and his leadership that made a huge difference. And the reason I highlight that is because that's exactly what I think as we look at those 30 or 40 or 50 years in the future that we will continue to need. I'm sure, you know, over the conference today and yesterday, you've had a chance to think through the, you know, the magnitude of the challenge and opportunity that lies ahead. You know, there's a little bit over 7 billion people on the planet today. That will grow to 9.5 billion by 2050. A lot of that based on, you know, the tremendous success in Africa to reduce disease and improve lifestyles and longevity of life. You know, that's part of the story. You know, the previous speaker talked about the continued economic progress in India, in China, in Africa. You know, we're going to see 2 billion people join the middle class by 2050. You know, you do the quick math of incremental growth in population, big growth in the middle class. It means that that all of us in agriculture need to address the challenge of how do we double the food supply by 2050. I always tell folks, if you say that really quickly, it seems like a long way off. You know, I'm going to turn 62 here in another month. That's 35 years away. That means by the time when we come back, when I'm 97 and we do the 80th anniversary or whatever, we're going to have to accomplish a lot. It also means that for all of us, it's going to be the legacy that we leave our kids and our grandkids in terms of how well we do on making those decisions and how we can improve productivity, how we can reduce food waste, how we can think about diet improvements around the world. I'm an optimist in this. You know, having spent my entire career in technology, looking at the incredible innovations that are out there. You know, the innovations in plant breeding, and you know, one of the reasons I get back to Des Moines so often is because you know, our largest molecular breeding lab is in Ankeny, just 10 miles or less from here, where we literally have the capability of looking at the DNA of every soybean seed and understanding how to breed even more precisely and more powerfully than what Dr. Borlaug ever might have dreamed was possible. The advances in biotechnology, you know, we're still at the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's possible in terms of new genes and new innovations. Those are advances in biology that are, you know, being paired now with, you know, the incredible innovations in information technology. I mean, all of us, sometimes we curse at it, I'm sure, but we're all living right now through the computerization and the digitization of farms around the world. And, you know, I believe that combination of the incredible advances in biology and information technology, you know, will drive the level of productivity gains that we need. And completely new areas are possible in terms of looking and understanding, what's going on below the ground in terms of soil health. And again, the combination of being able to map fields precisely and be able to characterize, the millions and billions of bacteria in a soil with tools that have never before possible, give me the absolute optimism that we can not only, double yields here in the U.S., but, triple and quadruple yields around the rest of the world. And when you look at the challenge of doubling the food supply, it's going to take all of that. And so when I look at my crystal ball in the future, it says that that the role of soybeans and the Iowa farmer is never been more important, and the opportunity has really never been brighter, assuming that we have the ability to use these tools. And that's where I think you have to step beyond the science, and you have to say what are the real challenges and where do we need to focus. And I think it's really on the policies and the understanding of consumers of our products, the safety and the efforts that we all put into the stewardship of these products, and make that very important case very strongly. When I grew up on my dad's farm, my grandfather was still around. 2 generations ago, half of the population of this country lived on the farm. Because of all of our success and productivity, less than 1% of the folks in this country, are directly involved in farming and agriculture. And that means we have a tremendous responsibility and an obligation to reach out to that other 99%. And that's going to be absolutely critical, not only for our own freedom to operate, but to address in the future the policies and the decisions that will influence the tools and capabilities that we can bring to a food secure world. When I think about food security in the end, I think about national security. I think about the role that food security has in terms of enhancing the environment. I think it's our great challenge. And I just leave you with the thought that none of us can do that alone. And I think the importance of a meeting like this is to bring together different inputs from across the chain, different participants in the ag ecosystem. It's going to take all of us working together diligently to address not only the opportunities, but the challenges that we face. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. We're going to go to you next, Jim, if you want to share your thoughts and observations, so that'd be great.
Sure. Again, my name is Jim Canute. I have the privilege of leading our Iowa operations for Farm Credit Services of America. When we were asked to be on the panel and look forward 10, 20, 30, 50 years, I think one of the first realizations that we came to is, I'm not sure our crystal ball is big enough for 50 years. Mm-hmm. So we're really going to focus on a decade or two out. We're going to stay within our knowledge and expertise scope at Farm Credit Services of America. And hopefully I'll talk about a few topics here where we bring some really unique data, information, insights to the conversation. The first one I'll talk about a little bit is the migration of livestock production to the upper Midwest. This has really been happening for 10 or 20 years. But as we look forward over the next couple decades, we see that trend continuing and maybe even accelerating. And the real driver behind that is, at the end of the day, business models and economics win out. And agriculture is no different than any other industry. Low-cost production wins in the end. And every time we have a cycle or a business event, whether it be a drought, a regulation change, more processing infrastructure built, feed cost advantages, it drives that business, it drives that industry to seek efficiency. We see this trend fairly broad-based. Turkeys, swine, eggs, dairy, cattle feeding. So it's not just one industry. Maybe someday we'll have aquaculture, and we'll add that to the list here in the upper Midwest. Again, I call it an upper Midwest trend. Iowa's clearly in the middle of that. And again, the key driver, again, is at the end of the day, economics and business models drive that industry consolidation, and we see that continuing in the upper Midwest. The second one is about land ownership and control. As we look forward again over the next decade or two, we see local capital, farmers and local investors really dominating land ownership and control. And that's been a point of speculation a lot over the past, even the past decade, as we've seen this significant run-up in land values, is who's going to own that land and who's going to control that land. And the data is pretty compelling. Over the last decade and into 2014, over 90% of the buyers out there in the market are local capital, farmers or local investors. And when you ask yourself why again, or talk about the trend, the trend is really the contrast in ownership motivation between outside capital and local capital. Outside capital, they tend to have shorter holding periods. They tend to have higher appreciation or return expectations. They tend to have impatient capital. They have greater access to alternative investments, other places to place their money. They tend to not be as emotionally attached to the asset. And when you contrast that with the motivation, ownership motivations of local capital, where my holding period is a legacy asset, it's multi-generation. I have a lot of comfort and knowledge with owning that asset. I may be not as comfortable with alternative investments. It's very difficult, and what we've seen is the trend is it's very difficult for that outside capital to compete with local capital and local competition. So again, local capital, farmers continuing to drive the land ownership and control. One trend that we see probably changing or really evolving is machinery and equipment utilization business models. And I'll say that one more time, machinery, equipment, utilization business models. And the first thing you'll notice, I didn't say ownership business models. That farmers are starting to understand I generate profits by utilizing machinery and equipment, not necessarily owning it. Over the last decade, especially as we saw grain production margins really expand, and of course tax law incentives drive an independent ownership model. And farmers were able to allocate capital up and down their balance sheet. But as we look forward, we see this clear driver here being a normalization of grain production margins. And that's going to force capital allocation decisions and priority by farmers. And we believe farmers will first allocate capital to the top and the bottom of their balance sheet. They're going to continue to invest in input and production costs, as well as control of land, grain storage, livestock facilities. So it'll be that middle section of their balance sheet where they're going to look for different alternatives: leasing, custom farming, equipment sharing, machinerylink.com. It's been around for almost 10 years. Maybe someday an Uber combine service. I don't know if you want to go way out there.
Now we're getting some predictions. I
Different
like
machinery.
we may have a hard time getting the city of Des Moines to approve it,
Yeah.
but
Different machinery equipment utilization models. And then the last one I thought I'd talk about, and careful here, Kirk, is the ethanol industry. And right away you go, oh Jim, in a soybean conference. But I think it's really important for Iowa, for the upper Midwest, for grain production. And the point I would make is there's been a lot of speculation around the ethanol industry. Will it just simply die a slow death? It doesn't seem to have the political clout anymore. The RFS standard is still in political limbo. You know, we saw all the midterm election commercials on TV. Did you really see one about ethanol? Dependence on foreign oil as we understand the considerable oil reserves and the fracking technology that we've discovered in North America. And then you throw in the emotion, food versus fuel, or does it harm my engine? And it just feels like ethanol, wow, is it really going to survive? But as we finance the industry, as we understand the industry, as we look out farther, I guess I'll borrow a quote from Mark Twain. The rumors of my demise have been greatly exaggerated. We believe that facts and science do win over myth and emotion over time. And maybe the true driver around all of that is ethanol is the cheapest form of octane on the market today. And there is a base demand for octane in our fuels and our gasoline. Our engine performance depends upon it. And even as you look forward with our higher mileage engines and the mile per gallon that the auto companies proclaim and the government mandates, it needs that octane to perform at that level. And the whole industry has gone through a significant deleveraging period, and they're very strong and they're very viable. So as we look forward 10 or 20 years from now, we do believe we will have a ethanol industry here in Iowa and the upper Midwest, and it'll continue to provide that domestic demand. It'll provide a cheap feed source and that needed octane base. And probably the last one I really believe is over the next 10 or 20 years, Iowa State will continue to beat Iowa in football and basketball. It seems like that trend is fairly clear, and so.
And we're okay with it.
Yeah,
we're okay.
so-
We're okay with it.
Okay.
Well, thank you. I just want to say before we have Paul speak here, just to make sure we clear the record on ethanol and corn, two things. One, I think myself and Grant and some others on our staff and farmers have done as much to introduce DDGs to China as anybody in the country. Because when we're over there selling soybeans, initially it was, what are these things? Then we had these cute little charts they used to use to grade DDGs by color solely. So they had these little handheld things that they would good quality or bad quality, but simply looking. So number one. Number two, as I've said many, many times, I don't want you to think I'm against corn because we do need a rotational crop in Iowa to go with soybeans. So I just want to make that clear. So Paul, if you've got a few comments, that would be great.
Very good. Kirk, thank you very much. It's great to have the opportunity to be in front of this group, particularly on your 50th anniversary. DuPont Pioneer has had a long and current and future great relationship with the Iowa Soybean Association, so it's great to be here. I'm going to really spend my couple of minutes talking about three areas: collaboration, innovation, and the right to operate. And as I describe each of those three areas, you'll hear some, I think, repetition in what's already been said by Rob and Jim, and probably also by Harry following me. So first of all, collaboration. And I already mentioned that Pioneer has a very long and successful relationship with the Iowa Soybean Association. That's a great example of collaboration. We work on many things. Certainly we want to continue to promote the opportunities around biodiesel. We want to continue to help invest in our infrastructure, whether it's roads, bridges, waterways. That's one of the clear and critical advantages that North American producers have against other parts of the world is our infrastructure. So we need to make sure that we continue to move that forward. And then, right in front of us, some of the topics of the conference this week, sustainability and nutrient management. Again, some strong collaborations that Pioneer's had with ISA. So collaboration is important, and then you even get into broader areas of collaboration, whether it's with an organization like ISA or with some of the panel members here that are sitting with me this morning. Collaboration is critical even within the industry and among competitors, and then with government organizations and even NGOs. If we're going to meet some of the challenges that we have today and over the next 10, 20, and 50 years, collaboration is going to be certainly part of that. But then that leads me right into innovation, and that's what my business is all about, and even that's what producers in North America are all about, is innovation. Our business is focused upon productivity. We want to deliver that productivity to soybean farmers here and throughout the United States. We can do that certainly with improving yields, but we also need to make sure that the protection or assurance of those yields is assured. And that can be done through biotechnology. It can be done through defensive traits, a whole set of things to make sure that the productivity we deliver in genetics is realized when the combine goes through the field. But innovation, really goes another step further than that. And, biotechnology has really delivered a tremendous amount of breakthroughs over the last 20 years. But a lot of that has been focused upon on the production side, or what we in the industry call the input side. And maybe that's created a little doubt or skepticism throughout the world as biotechnology has become more and more visible among consumers and throughout the world. But as we look to the next opportunities in innovation, there's a tremendous opportunity on the output side. And, sitting right here, both Pioneer and Monsanto have leading products that are going to bring increased value on the output side in soybean oil. Those products are in the market today and delivering value. But there's even greater opportunity beyond that. We've demonstrated that on the output side we can bring improved value to the oil, but next generation science will do the same on the meal side, bring a higher energy content to the meal side so that you've got a value equation that delivers better oil and at the same time higher energy on the meal side. That's great innovation, and can really go directly in dealing with some of the controversies that we face at the same time. Because while we've delivered great science through biotechnology on the input side, a lot of those who doubt what biotechnology can deliver want something with benefits to others, benefits to others than farmers, but benefits to not only the environment, but also to the consumer. And so here we've got products that are in the marketplace today that do just that. And we need to do collectively, and again, this sort of comes back to collaboration, we need to work collectively to ensure that those products are accepted, and we have the opportunity to adopt those products broadly so that the benefits to the consumer are realized both in the United States and throughout the world. Another innovation that is in front of us is the use of data. Rob spoke a little bit about some of the tools that we use to get all the productivity that we can to farmers. And some of those tools Norman Borlaug would have never envisioned. But data is one of them. And the more that we can use data to not only understand how to maximize yield, but also to take care of some of the other issues that growers face, whether it is sustainability issues, environmental issues, or right to operate issues, that also is a tremendous opportunity that's in front of us today that can help, again, deliver better results for growers throughout Iowa and the United States. So then that takes me to the last point that I wanted to address, and that is sort of the right to operate. And I hope you can see that some of the comments I made around collaboration and innovation are all sort of coming together around the right to operate. If I look at a grower is concerned with regulatory issues, environmental standards, potentially even in tax issues regarding compliance. And again, if we can work together to work with growers and with associations like ISA to ease some of the regulatory or legislative burdens around environmental issues or sustainability issues or water issues, nutrient issues, I think that's a great step forward so that we can preserve the grower's right to operate. But then it also comes down to the right to operate for us as an industry, regulatory issues. And again, my company, Rob's company, Harry's company, has regulatory hurdles that we need to get through in order to bring our science to the market so not only farmers can enjoy the benefits, but also consumers. And again, that comes back to products like Plenish and Vista, to get those through the regulatory process in a predictable fashion so that we can bring that science to growers and consumers around the world. Even today as we speak or sit here in the conference, it's great to hear that China appears to be stepping forward and releasing some of the regulatory constraints that we've been waiting for a number of months or in some cases years. So that's a step forward, but it certainly doesn't clear the way for a lot of other science that still needs regulatory clearance. It's a step forward, but there's a lot still that is yet to be done. So right to operate certainly has an effect on the growers' operations, certainly on the industry as we bring science forward, but even to the consumer or the general population. Again, Rob made the point about only 1% of the population today is close to the farm. I think that also has an effect on our collective right to operate, creating the awareness, the understanding of not only what farmers do that really drive the economy, drive international trade, but also to have a better understanding of what science does to contribute to food production and to make our food production not only safe and affordable, but also sustainable. So we've got our job there to do to protect our right to operate, to educate the consumers here and throughout the world. So hopefully you can see how all this sort of connects one with the other, collaboration, innovation, and preserving our right to operate. I'm just going to close here with the opportunity that's in front of us. I'm optimistic as well about the future and what we can do to meet the challenges. Everybody talks about the numbers out there, billions out there in the year 2050. But there's a statistic that is even closer to home than that, and that's only 5 years away. There's going to be more than 1 billion people over the next 5 years that move from lower class into the middle class, primarily in Africa, South Asia, and in China. More than 1 billion people will move into the middle class. And when they do that, what do they need? They need protein that comes from what we provide, through meat, milk, eggs, dairy products. That demand is going to be there, and it's up to us all collectively, through collaboration and innovation, to meet that challenge. And I'll leave you with one thought that sort of, when you look back on history, it's a good predictor of the future as we try and serve this more than 1 billion people that will move into the middle class over the next 5 years. And that one example is that 10 years ago, China was self-sufficient in soybeans. That was 10 years ago. Today, China imports 50 million metric tons of soybeans. That's equivalent to the entire production of Brazil. So I think that's an example of what we have today as an opportunity that's in front of us, is this burgeoning demand that we, industry, growers, and the science companies need to step up to and be able to help deliver against that great opportunity that's in front of us today, and will only get even greater in the years ahead. I'm excited about what we can do in collaboration to meet that demand. So, Kirk, again, thanks a lot. Look forward to the question period that follows.
Thank you, Paul. So you want to hand it to Harry, and Harry, you get to make the last opening comments here.
We are here today celebrating the 50 years of the Iowa Soybean Association. And when I was a boy, 50 years was a very long time. And 100 years was darn near at the beginning of time. I had graduated from college before we started the Iowa Soybean Association. So trust me, 50 years is nothing. And 100 isn't even very much. And if we go back 100 years, and Paul just pointed out that we can learn from history, there was about the same acreage of corn, ironically, in the United States as there is today, except the yield was just something on the top side of 20 bushels per acre. And soybeans didn't exist at all except for a few small patches that were cut by a horse-drawn mower for hay. And so when you look at the change from then till today, the technology, the genetics, the seed, the production practices, the usage of the crop, it would be almost beyond the comprehension of those that were before us. And so likewise, for me to try to predict exactly what our technology, genetics, cropping systems, and crop usages are going to be over the next 50 years is frankly beyond my comprehension. So I think the scientists and the companies that are represented here will develop the technology and make rapid progress. Our progress every year is getting faster than it was the year before. So I'm not concerned about that. It will take care of itself. What I am concerned about is where we have social and political barricades to the progress of this technology. When we have some bureaucrat someplace in the world telling every single one of the Iowa and U.S. farmers what they can't and cannot grow, that bothers me. Because advancing technology and advancing our genetics and making higher yielding crops, when it's controlled somewhere in the world by a bureaucrat or a politician, whether it be for political purposes or philosophical purposes, that bothers me. And frankly, I don't know how to take care of that. I'm extremely pleased that we have groups like the American and the Iowa Soybean Association to help address that for we farmers, to give us a little more clout in that respect. But those are the areas that bother me over the future. And I had a lot of things I wanted to say, and I'm older and I don't hear very well, but I caught Rob mentioning to the other panelists that if they would talk long enough, Harry couldn't present as many of his crazy ideas. So anyway, I appreciate being here with him. I think we're going to make great strides, but I am concerned about the social political side.
Well, thank you for that. And I didn't hear it, and I got better hearing than that, Harry. I didn't hear Rob say that, but certainly. You can see why I was excited about this panel. I mean, you were thinking it. And I got to be perfectly honest with you, Harry. When we were talking about this panel, I said the one guy that I'm a little nervous about is Harry Stein, because I don't know what he's going to say, you know, so I appreciate that. But you can see why I'm excited about. Those of you who know me know I could spend all day here just talking to these guys. And this is one of the things that I find really encouraging and exciting about the Iowa Soybean Association today, and really the farm organizations, is our ability to interact with these knowledgeable industry leaders in this conversation, because as Paul said, this collaboration is critically important, particularly as you think about the complexity of the issues. And I like to say all the time, either the world is spinning faster or I'm getting older. And my staff says, Kirk, it's both. It's both of those things, because it is a more complex world, and this need for collaboration and partnership has never been greater. But the challenge is, of course, is to do that collaboration and to do that working together on behalf of all of us in the industry. And I haven't been around certainly as long as Harry and many of these folks on the panel, but we've come a long ways, I believe, in the last 25 years of trying to bring together the entire chain from the growers, the processors, food companies, and certainly our technology providers and our financial institutions. But I just got to say, we got a ways to go. And so as you think about one of the things that was kind of a theme through all of this, either it's the right to farm or freedom to operate, and we talked about innovations. And one of the things that concerns me is again, Harry, you said I don't really know, and I can say I don't know exactly how to do it, but I would be interested in the panel's thoughts of, as you think about innovation and you think about the challenges, maybe emotional, maybe unfounded, and perhaps over time, we will get through all that stuff, because at the end of the day, you'd like to believe markets work and that facts will eventually win. I'm not sure that's always the case, that facts always win, as a student of politics. So what I'm asking the panel, if there's any thoughts that you might have, is, so how do we do this? How do we get together in a collaborative approach that really brings all of us together? Because there's a lot of efforts underway today on this communicating, this regulatory approach. So how do we go further in this collaborative approach to recognize that I agree with you, innovation is going to happen. I think we know that's going to happen. But we've got to get consumers and the rest of the chain to embrace this innovation. How do we do that more than we're doing today? Anybody like to take that one? Everybody looks down at the floor. This is.
Yeah, let me get started. I'm sure there's a lot of experience here on the panel. So I think a lot of it starts with we have to recognize that is all of our responsibilities. I know, looking back at at Monsanto and our experiences, there was a period after the biotech products were being launched in the mid-90s that we we thought our role was, a seed company to provide technology to growers, and that's where we put all of our efforts in terms of, communication and marketing, and I think we did a pretty good job of that. When you consider that probably 95% of the corn and soybean acres in the Americas now uses a biotech trait, and 30 countries around the world are planting biotech seeds. Farmers clearly understand the benefits of these technologies and these tools. But I think the learning there was we needed to be talking to consumers at the same time. And we were largely absent from that dialogue. And in that absence, there were plenty of folks who were willing to create misinformation and talk about really poor quality science and create a rumor mill that all of us now are working to address. And so I think the first step begins the recognition and the realization that it is our responsibility, and we've certainly looked at our role and really changed our approach, but so has the rest of the industry. And you're now seeing a lot of cooperation on new websites and sources of information. GMO Answers is a great example of that. The food industry is also part of that, and GMA Online is another great resource. But the cooperation is clearly there. A couple of things I've recognized and learned, and it's really important, is there's a tremendous interest in food. There's a huge interest in understanding the role of food production and both food security and the environment, and there's a real interest in learning about that. The key is that we have to provide that direct-to-consumer communication, directly to consumers in the content they want, in the format they want, and largely I think that is both through traditional media channels, but increasingly through social media and through the internet, and we need to do that. The second thing I've learned is we've got to remember that there are extreme voices, champions of the technology and folks who don't like the technology, but the vast majority of the people in the middle are just wanting to know and receive information and get answers to their questions, and there's a huge opportunity to move the needle. I had the privilege and the challenge and the scary experience a couple weeks ago to do a debate in New York City against some of the strongest antagonists of GMO technology. And science did prevail, and it is possible to talk to consumers about the benefits, and we won that debate. I think science won that debate, and we still got to remember that that is possible to do if we engage and communicate.
I think one of the mistakes that we made over the last 10 or 20 years, all of us, come from, basically a science background, and we had great science to bring to the market, and we thought that science and data and all the research that we did would simply tell the story, and it would be an easy adoption of something because we had science and the facts and the data behind us. But as Harry said, it is more of a social, political, and emotional set of issues, and I think we, underestimated the challenge to overcome that, especially when you're just talking science to a social issue. But we do have a great story, and I think GMO Answers and all those other sources of information will help us, because that really gives us the opportunity to tell the other side of the story, the environmental, the nutrient, the safety side of the story much more effectively, which is really what consumers want to hear. And I've gone from high and low to optimism to pessimism on all this. Maybe I'm now, Rob, at a little bit higher of a optimistic level. Oregon, recently had a ballot initiative to label the GMO content of all foods in the state. And 3 or 4 months ago, that was headed down to a landslide defeat. But over that last 3 months, prior to the ballot initiative being voted upon, getting information out there, getting facts, having more of a rational debate rather than the extreme arguments, ultimately resulted in that ballot initiative for mandatory GMO labeling being defeated. So I think that's an example where information and how it's delivered and debated can make a difference, because again, we've got a great story to tell about what we can do to not only advance food, but do it in a very safe and effective way.
Jim, you have something?
Yeah, I'll just make a very brief comment. I'd like to commend the Soybean Association, even Aaron Putsey. One of the things you do is you start something like the Food and Family Partnership. And it's probably a leader, certainly in the upper Midwest in the United States, about getting the facts out, connecting with consumers, connecting with others who are concerned about that. So I commend this association for taking a very proactive response. Others in the industry need to do the same. And then the other thing that I've seen is invite those who have very different views, invite them in. And sometimes when they see it from our perspective or our sides, or we separate emotion and myth from fact and fiction, we have seen minds change, just like the Oregon vote and many others. So invite them in, and I think that really has been effective and will work in the future.
Anything on this one, Harry?
My very best friend, Bill Mershman, is sitting here in the second row, and if you saw the pictures of the very first directors of the Iowa Soybean Association, he was one of the pictures you saw. But the reason I'm bringing this up is his church said Galileo was wrong, and they did correct that and say that was a mistake, but it took 400 years. And so it is true. Economics win in the long run, science wins in the long run, but I'm concerned at my age about how long it takes to get people over to the right side.
I appreciate it. I want you to make sure you're jotting down questions. We're going to have questions here in a minute, but I want to top one last topic before we open it up to the audience, and that is something that Jim talked about a little bit, and this structuring and the tighter margins that farmers are going to be facing for at least for the next couple of years anyway, depending on rainfall and a number of other things. But I'm really, again, the farmers that I work for, I'm beginning to hear more and more about this concern about long-term, the structure and this relationship, and really the capital needs of farming today, and the incredible amount of risk that producers really are accepting every single year when they buy the inputs from leading companies that are represented here and take the risks that are necessary. Even with great crop insurance, there's a lot of financial risk. Any thoughts or you think about what it looks like, this relationship between lenders and tech providers and seed companies, even 10 or 20 years from now, this relationship between the growers themselves as you think about the sharing of the risk? Because I hear a lot of farmers say, I agree with you, this innovation is going to happen. Companies are going to figure out. They're a little concerned about whether consumers are going to accept it. They're worried about whether they're going to have the ability to use those technologies. But they're also worried about the cost of that technology and whether or not all of that technology is going to be needed and whether they can afford it in the first place. So any thoughts you have about this changing nature of the structure of agriculture, particularly as it relates to your relationship with the growers themselves? Anybody have any thoughts on, I know that's a tough question, but any thoughts on what that looks like and where we're headed?
It feels like the banker's going to go first
Yeah.
here.
Many of them want to hear from you, Jim, so that'd be
Well, we do hear this concern a lot, as clearly I think 2014, and we started saying this a year ago, would be the beginning of a soft landing for agriculture. So that's not something that we made up last week or last month, but we saw some of the supply side response in our grain industries coming for several years. And even though we had a drought and we had some continuance and we had that ethanol thing thrown in there that really demand overwhelmed supply for a period of time, that has all really corrected itself. And so, the question now is, now what? Really, now what? And here's our perspective. Agriculture, unlike a number of other industries that have gone through what you would call an upcycle or a boom time, was extremely disciplined financially. We do not see the leverage in land acquisition. I can speak to some facts about that. We financed about $3 billion worth of real estate transactions last year, right here in Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota. And the average loan to value on those transactions was 43%. So the producers, the farmers brought exceptional capital and collateral to the table. They understood that leverage wasn't their friend right now at this moment. And while they will have to, this will be a period of, I think, mutual adjustment for landlords and landholders as we maybe reestablish the value of a rented acre, as we look at our input costs, as we look at the advantages of our crops and our production. It's something where we're approaching that from a position of financial strength. And so agriculture has not made the mistakes that other industries have made, where in an up cycle or a boom cycle where they have become over leveraged. And I think that will bode well for us over the long period. And again, we believe that markets are necessary. The definition of a market is always to bring buyers and sellers together at some equilibrium point. They're meant to be fluid. They're meant to be dynamic, whether that's owners and sellers of land, whether that's buyers and sellers of rented acres, whether that's buyers and sellers of seed genetics, all those things, that the market does work, and it does bring buyers and sellers together at an equilibrium point that works for all.
Go ahead, Paul.
Go ahead, Paul.
Just a brief comment. You know, our business, of course, is to deliver better products to farmers. And certainly a lot of that is to drive for increased productivity, but it also comes with it the obligation for risk mitigation. And whether that's technology or defensive traits or agronomic practices or data, all those things are around risk mitigation. And I hope that each and every year we make progress, not only in better products, but also in mitigating the risks that growers face. A good example of this, you know, in just the last number of years, I think it was 2012 that we had the drought, or was it 11? 12. 2012, massive drought, not only in significance, but in breadth. And you really need to go back to 1993 for something that was equal to that level of impact. And in fact, you could argue that 12 was more because it was more severe and over a broader geography than 1993. The corn yield, you know, Harry went back to the 1920s with corn yields at 20 bushels. But more recent proof of the risk mitigation is in 2012, I think the average yield in the United States was 128 bushels to the acre. A lesser drought in 1993 was 98. So that, you know, over just short of 20 years, I think is a good example of the type of risk mitigation that can be achieved through science and the support and services that go along with it.
Harry, do you have a comment on that? Harry, I'd like you to have a comment on that. So how do you see the structure and this relationship moving forward between companies like yours and the farmers that I know you're so focused on?
Well, I really totally agree, because it is our responsibility to share the risk, all of us here, and I think we're doing that in both in livestock and crop production. There's a number of different things that the companies involved in the technology, the seed, the genetics, whatever it is, are indeed sharing risk. And we all win when we do that. And so we don't do that, frankly, to be nice. We do that because it's good business.
I knew that's what he'd say. So I want to clear up one thing before we go to the audience. So some of you are wondering why I'm on a stool and these guys are on a chair. Jim, would you stand up for a minute? Jim, stand up for a minute. Do you see how tall Jim is? If I were sitting down that level, I would look like a runt up here. So I just wanted to make sure you understood that. So we are going to go to questions. We have a couple of staff, I believe. It's a little hard to see here, but we're looking for questions. I know you have questions. We don't have a lot of time, so please don't be shy. Don't be bashful. Please, I want you to ask your own questions. So we'll get a mic. We're just going to start back there. Go ahead. Please state your name and then ask your question, please. Try to hold the speeches, but give us your questions if you can.
Hubert Hageman from Carroll. I'm going to direct this to Jim because you guys have been talking about the risks and that kind of stuff that's sharing, but also what about how do you see agriculture going to be able to service the debt that it's going to take to put a viable operation together, both in livestock and grain farming, or one or the other?
Sure, yeah. The question really is about servicing the debt or debt loads and how do you make the cash flow work. And, you know, again, I brought up one example of the middle of your balance sheet, machinery and equipment. We're already seeing a number of producers saying, hey, what about a lease? Because I don't have to use working capital for a down payment. I may be able to get a better annual payment to improve my cash flow. We're seeing a lot of our producers come back to us and said, Jim, I bought a farm, or I bought two in the last 10 years. And you know, I was making good margins, I was making good money. I put that farm on a 10-year amortization, and honestly, I can't afford that payment right now. So we're looking at that real estate or that long-term debt, and we're saying, well, would a 20-year amortization or a 25-year amortization work today? And so again, we're adjusting the life of that asset to the cash flow. We know we'll have up cycles during those time periods, and they can certainly pay down, pay ahead, but we're finding cash flow solutions for that. In terms of livestock, a lot of our livestock industries are vertically integrating. So you are becoming part of a protein system. And that profit sharing is happening up and down that system. You know, the swine industry is a perfect example. If you have a hog barn here in Iowa, you know, you're going to be in the protein production system with an integrator, with a processor, and they are structuring it so that that livestock facility, the livestock growth will cash flow for you. You'll get significant value from the benefits of the manure or the nutrients, especially if you farm and you put it on your own land. And so there's a number of ways that agriculture, again, can make adjustments to the higher demands and the higher costs and the higher capital outlay that it's going to take not only today, but in the future.
Excellent. A question over here? Oops. Yeah, Skip Ray. Yeah, go to the, there we go.
Lindsey Griner from Kyoto, Iowa. As farmers, from time to time, we get a chance to talk to non-farm people, consumers, about how we do things on the farm. And I'd like to have about a 1 or 2 sentence, quick, simple answer to explain GMOs to non-farm people that explains how it benefits them and not only me. Not being a scientist, I'm really at a loss when it comes to explaining science.
Well, I'll tell you what. I've got a bunch of these in my bag.
Did you guys set this up? I mean, he's got it.
And Ben, you're in the back there, right? So Ben in the back. I did blow it, though. I'm almost embarrassed to do this, but I've got my business card here, and on the back I've got a corn thumb drive. We should have had a soybean one. You know, that's Ben's fault, not mine. But got a lot of background information on safety, communication, access to all the websites, a couple of the videos and talks that I've done from cooking shows and things like that really address that question. And generally, you know, what I find the best way to talk to consumers about GMOs and what they are and what's different is to basically start with the point that man has been genetically modifying crops from the beginning of time, and the GMO technology is even a more precise and better way to do it, and that works most of the time. You know, if you're getting into the details of you know, gene insertion and what's the difference between gene insertion and crossbreeding, we're probably all over our heads. But interestingly enough, the science is breeding and biotechnology are becoming so similar in what we're finding out that I think for most people, if you just go with that, you're going to be where you need to be. And go ahead.
Anybody else have a? Harry, what do you say when we ring trade teams out to you and these guests from overseas come and ask you about GMOs? What do you tell them?
I can't tell you right here.
Oh. Yeah, I love this guy. Anybody else got a question over here? We have one over here. So go ahead. See, I'm going to give Mike.
I got.
Go. Oh, no, just
Yeah.
Ron. Okay, go ahead, Ron, in the back of the room.
Ron Heck from Perry. So over the last 50 years, we've seen the corn acreage stay about the same, while soybeans took over almost half of the acreage that used to go to oats, hay, and wheat. So you look ahead 50 years, now that we have this sizable investment in soybeans, you think in 50 years we'll be growing greatly improved corn and greatly improved soybeans, or is there a chance for another crop to come back in and have a resurgence with investment? So, you know, where wheat or oats or hay maybe makes a comeback, or another crop.
Harry, you want to answer that question, or you want to pass on that question? Is there something you can share with us today?
Well, we have 900 acres of Monarda growing right now, and so we could get some seed for you, Ron. Obviously, I don't know for sure, because same old story. If you'd have gone back 100 years ago and said soybeans are going to be where they are today, no one, absolutely no one would have believed that. So yes, we may have crops coming along. But right now, corn, I think, in all fairness, is probably going to make more progress than soybeans. But economics rule. I think that's pointed out over here. So economics will take care of this. Consumers are going to buy and growers are going to produce what economically works. So I'm really not concerned about it.
I've kind of got two views on that. So first of all, there's an enormous amount of technology that's going in behind corn and soybean breeding, and the ability to breed even more precisely and integrate that with the precision ag tools is it's going to create incredible yield gains, which will drive grower economics. And I think the economists that we heard prior to this session made the point that the world, if you look at the demand curve we're on for the next 30 years, the world needs an incremental 500 million bushels of corn and 200 to 300 million bushels of soybeans every year. So I think their place is set for a foreseeable future. But I'd also emphasize that all of these tools now are being applied aggressively to all the other crops. We can sequence literally every gene in a corn plant in about a day. We can do the same thing for wheat and other crops. And so I think what we will see is that we will see an upgrading in the rates of innovation for crops that didn't have that first wave of benefit that we saw with corn and soybean. And that will not only impact crop choice in this country, but it will help drive yields and productivity to some of the more localized or orphan crops that you see grown in parts of Africa and Asia as as these innovations start to have their impact.
Is Dean Winterstein still here? So this is why I'm excited. Some of you know I've been on a public school board for a long time, and I know, Paul, you're a big leader in STEM, but this is why all of us have a responsibility to make sure we're encouraging and helping young people today understand the exciting opportunities that are available in science and technology. We've got to get more Iowa young people into this industry, because I've had the opportunity, fortunately, to tour research facilities, and kids get really excited about Silicon Valley, but we have nothing to be ashamed of when it comes to the Silicon Valley of technology. And anything a young person wants to do in technology with computers in Silicon Valley, they could do something in the Midwest, and Iowa particularly, and do something a lot more important than figuring out how to hack into Sony pictures. But just that editorial comment.
It's also amazing how many of the Silicon Valley companies are now interested in the ag space. Between the satellites, the sensors, the drones, the amount of innovation entering the ag space is really mind-boggling. I mean, this is going to be an exciting industry to be in for a very, very long time.
Absolutely. Got a question here, and then we are going to get to the president of the Iowa Soybean Association. I guarantee that he's my boss. So I guarantee you, Tom, we're going to get to you. We got a question here first.
So,
You're on.
Ray Gasser, farmer from Iowa, Harry. I just wanted to sort of tag on to what the question Lindsay had, and really it's about consumer acceptance. It's about about, how they view agriculture, how they accept the technology or a fear of the technology we have. We have so many roles to play, in water quality and regulatory issues, and our consumers are also constituents to our legislators, and that our ability to influence them and share our message with consumers, and I know your companies are beginning to look at that, but how can we all partner together on this, and how can we all make a difference?
Anybody
Well,
additional comments?
it does come back to what I mentioned during my earlier remarks, and that's collaboration, because we do have to work together rather than independently to get those messages across. And, we do need to think about how we communicate and make this simple to both of your points. We have been manipulating plants since the beginning of time. We can do it now precisely, more quickly, and better than ever before. And do that through bringing better nutrients, better environmental impact, more food safety and security. That is a great message to be able to be delivered. But to your point, we've got to do it much more collectively than individually.
We got a question over here.
I wonder, Norm Chambers, Corwith, and can you imagine food production bypassing the traditional agriculture, and they use ag raw materials to manufacture nutrition needs, what I call like fake food? And will generations down the road even know what real food is?
I've been spending too much time in California the last year. We acquired a company I mentioned earlier that, for me, it's really exciting to see all of the Silicon Valley companies who are interested in precision agriculture, robotics, and all that. But there are a few of them that are interested in the non-traditional foods. So the hamburger and the Petri plate, and every time I go back and there's something that happens between San Francisco and Berkeley. I haven't quite figured it out yet, but there's always an article about insects and other protein sources in the diet. So, there may be a movement out there. I'm not sure I'm going to be the first to sign up for that. But
Rob, I know you've been to China. The insects really aren't that good. They really aren't that bad.
Yeah, I kind of like that pork chop or that steak, I guess. Maybe I'm a little too biased.
So, Rob, while you might have your doubt or skepticism about Berkeley and San Francisco or D.C. or New York, when you look at South Asia and Africa and China, they want to move into a higher protein diet. And, that is billions of people, and it's the next 10, 20, 30, even Harry in our lifetimes. That is very predictable of what they are going to need and want. And we can't forget that as those lifestyles improve, they are going to want meat, milk, and eggs.
Yeah, and I think not only will they want it, but I think we have the opportunity and the obligation to make sure that they have that choice. And I think that's why it comes back to the Americas, and the breadbasket that we represent will be a big part of that. And I think that you're exactly right. When you think about doubling the food supply in the next 35 years, you have to put that in the perspective of that's producing more food than we have in the entire history of the world. And so, it is a tremendous challenge. I'm absolutely convinced that we can do it. I absolutely believe in the bottom of my heart that we have the moral obligation to do it, and to do it in a way that helps us preserve the environment. And I think that's the kind of the common ground that I see different people and different organizations coming to realize, is that there will be more demand. What we have a choice of as society is how do we meet that demand, and maybe it'll be artificial meats and insects. I think for a lot of us, I think it's going to be crops and animal products to meet that demand, and then the conversation really needs to shift to the common ground we all share in wanting to achieve a food secure world, wanting to achieve a world where the negative impacts that agriculture can have on the environment get mitigated, whether that's water issues, whether those are greenhouse gas issues. And what I find is actually talking about our support, our alignment, and our common interests on the environment and on food security, and the emotional link that we have to that is really the starting point to then the science and the more detailed technical discussion of how we do it. So I think, Ray, to the question you asked, it's really an important one. Sometimes you got to look at the end game before you come back and figure out how we're going to get there, because that's really the common ground that we all share. Thanks.
President Oswald, do you have a question?
Well, is this mic live? Okay. My questions tend, and Kirk would understand this, my questions tend to be out there. And so I'm going to toss the out there
I
questions.
make no editorial comments at this point.
Yes, you can later. Key point is, we think about the progress we've made in 50 years. A lot of things, auto steer, yield monitors, GMO crops. What I worry about, or at least I think about, is what are those things on the 10% fringe that are on your radar that you may not want to talk about, but could happen, like an airplane flying into a building. You can't predict a black swan, but what might be the black swans that you're wondering about in the future, both from the good side of our business as well as the bad?
So, Jim, what do you think about that black swan issue there?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is Fred Hoiberg leaving.
Amen.
So assuming we survive that catastrophe, I think we all have in the back of our mind some kind of bioterrorist event that upsets our world and our safety and our perception of our normal lives, children, populations, etc. We hope and pray, I think we all do, that things like that would never happen. In this world today, I think never's a difficult thing. I think everyone in the world's doing what they can. We have a hungry world to feed, and I think Paul continues to make a great point. It's not going to stop, and they're going to want protein. I think there are some givens, as we look forward, and I'm going past a black swan, that we don't have a bioterrorist event. Because what it may do is it may set back that ability to really provide that protein, provide open trade, provide import-export infrastructure, all those things that are going to be so necessary for this world in the next 20, 30, 50 years, that we can provide as long as normalcy or humane thoughts prevail.
Paul?
As I think about it, maybe it is to the point I made during my original remarks when we started, and that is something interrupting our right to operate. Whether that's you as a grower because of legislative issues or environmental issues, or we as industry because of a regulatory process. We've got challenges in front of us. I think we can meet the demands that the world has over the next 20 to 30 years, but if anything interrupts our ability, again, from a right to operate standpoint, that would have, I think, a compromising effect. And again, that sort of comes back to, I guess the burden is on us, all of us, to work together to make sure that, a barrier on the right to operate doesn't occur.
Robert Harry, you want to talk about a black swan?
No, we don't have it.
You don't have any of those, all right. Okay, we got a question over here. We got just time for a couple more questions, folks. We're going to wrap up. We've got one there, and we got one over here too. Okay.
Ben Smith with HTS Ag. We're a small precision ag technology company here in Iowa. And big data has been one of the biggest buzzwords in agriculture in the last year. I was wondering, what role do you think all the data coming from precision ag technology will play in your business going forward, as well as the farmer's business?
Yeah, first of all, I'm from the science side of it, it is, I think, going to create the next green revolution, because I think, all these advances in biology and all the advances in data science and information technology are going to really change the kind of products that we discover and develop, but they're also going to basically change the way we farm. I think it is the absolute driver of productivity and yields, and it's going to be global. We'll talk a lot about how it's changing in the U.S. Where we've been able to to map all 30 million fields and start to think through all the decisions that a grower makes. But you can go to India and China and Africa today, where for the first time in their entire lives, farmers are getting text messages on weather patterns, or they're getting advisories, and literally for the first time getting agronomic advice tailored to their farms that are coming through the cell phone. So the combination of the advances in biology and information technology are going to change every aspect, I think, of what we do. And in many ways, agriculture is the last major industry. You think about what information technology has done for banking, what it's done for communications or entertainment, and how it's changed our lives. It's going to, agriculture is the last, major industry to be digitized, and I think that's going to be terrific, because I think it's going to make us all smarter as we think about farming. It's going to make us, better able to integrate the complexity of the decisions that we make, and make those decisions more economically, more environmentally, friendly in the future. So I'm excited about the opportunity. I use one of Dave Freeberg's example. He's the CEO of the Climate Corporation. The average car you buy today has 3,000 sensors in it. It won't be long before, the planters and all of the tractors and all of our farm devices have, that ability to provide that real-time feedback. You map it out through a growing season, from the time you get off that combine and you're starting to think about, how am I going to prepare that field, what seed decisions, what cultivation, what nutrient decisions, what am I going to do in terms of pest control and other options. A farmer's making 40 or 50 decisions through the course of a year on every field. Now imagine when those decisions are based on the historical data for that field, when they're based on precise knowledge of the soil, precise knowledge of the weather outlook. It's going to change, both the opportunity for productivity gains, but it's going to be a major tool for risk reduction and really rethinking, how we utilize our inputs and our valuable resources. So I see it being absolutely game changing, and I'm absolutely excited and delighted for that, because I think it's going to be one of the great driving boosts for agriculture for the future.
Well said, I think. We're in ISA, we're beginning to call it digital farming, because we think big data doesn't really capture everything.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. We question over here, and then we'll go back over here. Go ahead.
Sure. Good morning. My name's Adrienne Boffman. I'm with Forbes Export Services. I'm a heavy machine exporter here in Des Moines. I guess I have a couple questions on my mind. Where do all of you see the negotiation points with the transatlantic trade, the free trade agreements that are being negotiated in the Pacific and the EU 28 currently? And I guess I also would be remiss if I didn't ask, especially this distinguished panel, what do you see as our transportation issues as we have the expansion of the Panama Canal nearing its finale, obviously benefiting Brazil, but where do you see with the development of the Panamax ships, where are our transportation challenges, especially, I mean, I'm 45 years old, maybe young to this audience, but I am trying to lead the millennials that I'm hiring right now, obviously very technologically advanced, but we have an oil and gas boom coming here in 10 years, so just wondered if you had any thoughts on those issues. Thank you.
Well, I'll make a comment first on the second, or first point, and then maybe more detailed on the second that you make, and then encourage others to add. First on trade. I mean, that is our industry. It is our industry, and the more open trade, the more free trade that we have, the more trade agreements that we can accomplish. I think that's good for. Excuse me? Where are they at, sir? Progress is being made. You know, it's in the political environment that we have today. It's difficult to predict, but you know, I think you've got a tremendous amount of momentum to move them forward. But you know, predicting when they might be accomplished, difficult. Infrastructure. I made those comments, you know, in my remarks that infrastructure, I think, is one of the greatest advantages that we have in the United States. And it is deteriorating, so we need to make sure that we stay ahead of it, because when you get behind, that's a big hurdle to overcome. Brazil is a tremendous competitor for the United States. They have a lot of advantages in their favor, but one of the advantages that they don't have is infrastructure. I think Brazil will solve their infrastructure problems and therefore become even more of a competitor than they are today. So I think that puts the burden on us that we better get ahead of it so that we maintain that competitive advantage with infrastructure.
Anybody else on the panel?
We've studied the Panama Canal expansion, you know, quite a bit, and as you know, construction projects, are they ever done on time? It's supposed to be complete in 2015. I assume many of you know it's 80-some% complete today. You know, we've talked a lot about the advantage for Brazil and the trade route to China and 1,700 miles shorter and et cetera. We really believe it'll be an advantage for both North and South America. We think that the eastern and the central United States, the Mississippi River Basin here, as we import, export. We talked a lot about, again, this need for protein. We are very good in the United States at further processed foods. And so as that Panama Canal opens up, more trade opportunities, I think the basic business model may be container vessel backhauls of further processed foods as we evolve to, again, feed that billion people coming in Asia and other parts of the world. Again, speculation, but the building blocks for that basic business model are absolutely in place right now, and the Panama Canal will open up, I believe, more opportunity versus simply just more competition.
Got a question over here, I believe. Yeah, go ahead.
Dean Coleman from Humboldt. Harry, you briefly touched on this in your opening remarks about politics and that kind of stuff. So how do we balance the ability to release traits in the U.S. that will benefit the U.S. farmer? How do we balance that against our trade partners that may use it for political gain or whatever that you spoke about? How do we balance that so that we can get the new traits to use to improve our bottom lines and still maintain the ability to export our products?
Well, I'm sort of the old school where we very gently and kindly ask them to approve these things and give them all the information and a reasonable amount of time that they need. And at that point, we move forward. Kind of the walk quietly and softly and carry a big stick type thing. And then we simply start producing them. I get a little aggravated. We say, well, China is our big major customer. That's a two-edged sword. We can't get along without them, but they can't get along without us. And so, particularly in the case of soybeans, if the United States and Brazil adopts a new trait, I would suggest that China will approve it tomorrow afternoon. So that's the approach I would take, which in all fairness is a bit different than some of my friends. But we don't think it's correct for some bureaucrat or politician, whether it's China or any place else in the world, telling not only every U.S. farmer, but every farmer in the world what they can raise or not raise, particularly when it's advanced science, which is actually going to benefit every consumer in the world. So every consumer, as well as the farmers, are being restricted on occasion for philosophical or political purposes, and I simply would not let that stand.
That's why Harry's never going to run for political office. I can tell you right now. I appreciate that. Other comments on this? They're applauding the fact that you're not going to run for political office, Harry.
But it is
I think it'd be fun if you would. And go ahead.
I don't know if whether Iowa's ready for that or not. You know, it is a huge challenge. You know, to put it in perspective, to launch a biotech soybean or corn seed in the U.S. not only requires regulatory approval from EPA, FDA, and USDA, but basically 40 import countries from around the world. So the regulatory mechanisms are becoming more complex, and that's adding cost and delay to the process. And Harry points out rightfully that that's delay in innovation that basically hurts not only farmers but consumers around the world in terms of keeping up with the productivity that we need. Key opportunity here, I think, is to look at the synchrony around the timing of submissions. The reason that China in particular has the delay is because the Chinese have had the policy of not looking at a regulatory approval until a product has already been approved somewhere else. And by design, that will always result in the Chinese approval being the last. So there's been obviously a lot of awareness on this. There's both the federal government, and I know Iowa and ASA in general are very focused on this. So working on simultaneous synchronous approvals of these products on a global basis would be a key step in taking both the pressure off and also accelerating the adoption of technology that's going to be very much needed.
I think those are great comments. Some of us have had the opportunity to meet with Minister Han, who's the Minister of Agriculture in China, and he tries to dismiss me most of the time, which is fine. But when I bring up this issue, he reminds me that, first of all, you don't understand Chinese politics. You don't understand that I still have several 100 million Chinese farmers that I'm ultimately responsible for. And they're very fearful, very, very fearful in China at the government level about any kind of biotech event that actually, again, in reality or perception, causes something to go wrong in the food system in China. Because if you know much about Chinese history, it's usually related to when the peasants, as they call them, or food issues that cause an uproar, and then suddenly the communist government, which at the end of the day is very capitalistic, but their number one priority is to remain in control. And so they really don't like the risk that they believe. And again, they're using it for trade agreements. We have time for, I think, one more question over here.
Hi, Scott Youngman with Beck's Hybrid in Adel. And my question's for Dr. Fraley. First off, I want to give credit to this distinguished group here. I sit here in awe of the people here that are helping feed the world of this panel and your companies. But my question's around probably genetics. And if we separate out the precision side and we separate out all the great things the Iowa farmer is doing with yield gains, is it 3 bushels a year now in corn, and hopefully getting to a bushel on soybeans, right? If we physiologically attribute it, I just want to take it right back to genetics and not, either through breeding or genetic modification. What physiologically do you feel we've done to the corn or the soybean plant to add to these yield gains?
Well, it's a great question, and as you pointed out, the rates of gain for these two crops are accelerating with the breeding tools and the biotech traits that are available. I mean, we'll be launching by the end of the decade the first corn hybrids with 10 different biotech traits in them. We're now using the knowledge of the precise genome and gene composition of corn and soybean with accelerated breeding efforts that each cycle of breeding is driving that rate of gain. I think the question that as you were looking at what have we done and what's going to build onto that yield, clearly the density intolerance in corn and driving for higher populations and changing the architecture of that corn plant so that we can look at multiple plants per acre is remarkable. I left my dad's farm in 1970 the average planting population for corn was 17,000 plants per acre. This year we're at 30. And, in another, by the time we talk about 2050, I'm expecting that, that will be somewhere, closer to 50,000 plants per acre, to drive that. Much of the story in soybean has been disease. And I hear again, these markers and the ability, to identify in that vast pool of global soybean germplasm, the disease resistance genes we need for SDS, for, the variety of fungal and nematode diseases has been a big part of it. But also here we're again starting to see, the changes to the plant architecture and, efficiency gains that I think will drive yield. And I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that we will be able to double yields in this country, by the time we see that 2050 timeframe with the amount of innovation that is going in.
Harry, you have a comment on this one? Why do I keep picking on you, Harry? I don't know. But do you have a comment on his question about the physiology changes?
I would simply agree with Rob, except he's about 20 years short of the time span here we're going to be able to do this.
All righty. Well, I want to, first of all, thank the panel for this discussion. I could stay here all day, but I know some of you want to get on the road, and we do have a policy conference yet this afternoon. But first of all, I want to say thank you for your participation and your insights. Please show our appreciation with a round of applause, please. But I also must say, I also want to thank all of you. You are not only leaders in our industry, but as all of you have said, we appreciate the partnership and the collaboration with the Iowa Soybean Association. You're all four of you, individually and at the company level, are good friends and great supporters of the association. So I would like a second round of applause for all you do to support the Iowa Soybean Association. Thank you. That's good.